Right, so this has been a long time coming, but I've decided to make a video about the Game Boy Advance, my personal favorite handheld gaming system of all time. I'm going to be doing a collection video sort of revolving around the different games that I've accumulated for it over the years, talk about a few other things relating to it, and I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different approach. Usually when I do these kinds of videos, which really hasn't been too often anymore, I usually just, throw out the games in alphabetical order, just because, I keep all of my different games alphabetized on the shelf. But in this video, I'm actually, since this is also kind of a retrospective look back on my favorite handheld, I figured I would also just sort of go over the games, not in really the order I have them arranged, but in the order that I actually got them, at least as well as I can remember. My memory might be a bit off in a few spots, but this is sort of going to be like a chronological trip back through my collection. And, just sitting here, I got the original Game Boy Advance, which, this is not the original one I had at first, but, same model. I love the design. It's just, it's hard to imagine playing without a backlit screen and having to use AA batteries, but I mean, I played the hell out of this thing as a kid, all the time, and this is what I use now. This is the SP, and this is the second model that's extra bright. You can, different brightness levels on this middle button. Love the clamshell designs that they've been using ever since, like the DS, the 3DS. Not the 2DS, though. That's sort of a... 2DS is kind of an interesting beast, but that's another video altogether. So I'll start out with the first game that I ever got on my Game Boy Advance, and that is Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2. And this is basically a port of Super Mario World, which was originally a Super Nintendo game, and this is my first game because I loved the Super Nintendo Mario World growing up, and to have this on the go, on top of the fact that I hadn't really played it in a long time at that point. At that point I didn't have my Super Nintendo anymore. This is just fantastic. I spent hours and hours playing this game. Really a fantastic way to kick off my time with the Game Boy Advance. Really, really solid port. Added a few convenient features. Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland, another one of my favorites. Very much lighter on the difficulty. Not to say Mario World is an especially hard game, but I was pretty awful at games as a kid, and this one was interesting because I was actually able to beat it relatively quickly. There was one part in particular that tripped me up, but didn't really have that hard of a time with this game as a kid. Really a lot of fun. Still like to go back and play this when I'm in the mood for just a quick, simple platformer. If you like Kirby games, you owe it to yourself to play this. I love this game. I've got a real soft spot for this one. It's actually, as it turns out, I found out it was a remake of the NES Kirby's Adventure. Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3. And this is the only one of the Super Mario Advance games that I played where I didn't play the original version first. In fact, I didn't even know this was a Super Nintendo game until I looked at the box when I got it. I thought this was a new Game Boy Advance game because I'd never heard of the Super Nintendo one up until this point. But this is a brilliant game. If you were to count this as a Mario game, it'd probably be one of my favorite Mario games, if not my favorite. It's just such a cleverly made game. Very challenging. I tell you, it was one heck of a time getting through this as a kid. But I love this game. Haven't played through it in a while. I've been thinking about getting around to that one of these days. This is an interesting one. Warioware Inc. Mega Micro Games. And this kicked off like a whole series. Like I think one just came out on the Wii U or something. But this is the one that started it off. And this is a really interesting game. It's like, for those of you who've never played a WarioWare game, they're basically like these compilations of different like mini games strung together within these different stages that you have to like go through. It's like a very arcadey sort of score-based game, and there's a lot of different mini games you can unlock. And this is another one that I spent an incredible amount of time on as a kid, and I haven't gone back to it in a while, but I will one of these days. It's definitely, I think it's the strongest of the WarioWare games I played. Not an actual Game Boy Advance game, but the disc for the Game Boy Advance player for the GameCube, which basically lets you play any kind of Game Boy game on your GameCube, which I thought was awesome. I got this for my birthday as sort of a... Yeah, I got this as a birthday present from some relatives a few days after I got my actual GameCube as a birthday present, almost 10 years ago now. And I got this thing here. This is my GameCube, and this is the Game Boy player. You would basically, just put the cartridge in. I'll just use an old Game Boy cartridge, Bubble Bobble. Just put it in there, and there's like a little eject slider over here. Works really simple. You have to put the disc in first to boot it up, but I mean, I thought that was awesome. I still think it's pretty awesome. Just another reason I absolutely love Nintendo during this time period. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, and I gotta say, this is the only Mario and Luigi game I can still stomach. Like, I know Dream Team just came out on the 3DS, and I had Partners in Time and Bowser's Inside Story, but I don't know. This one has a lot of the same problems that I have with the current Mario and Luigi games, but they're not as... I don't feel like there is much of an issue in this one. Like, this feels like the most balanced, the most fully realized, and just overall the most fun game in the whole series. And I don't know, I just have trouble getting into the other ones. I remember this game completely blew me away as a kid. It was the first Mario RPG I ever played, and well, now after playing some of them, I do prefer the Paper Mario games. I still have a soft spot for this one. Not so much its sequels, but it's just me. Metroid Zero Mission, fantastic game. First Metroid I ever played, and I'm not really the biggest Metroid fan out there, but I really like this game. I feel like it's a really good Metroid to start with. The mechanics are really fluid, responsive. It's not quite as floaty as something like Super Metroid, and it works really well. Like, it's a remake of the original Metroid, and it comes with the original Metroid as an unlockable, which I always thought was really cool. But I spent a lot... This is another one I spent a lot of time on. I played the Game Boy Advance quite a bit when I was younger, and to this day, this is one of my favorites. Probably one of my top 5 on the system. I still need to get around to playing Fusion one of these days. You know, as fleshed out as my collection is right now, there are still a few games I haven't gotten around to yet. Whoops. Final Fantasy 1 and 2, Dawn of Souls, and this was the first Final Fantasy game I ever played. And I really like the version of Final Fantasy 1 that is on this collection, but I was never able to get into number 2. The leveling system kind of sort of threw me off a bit, which is weird because it uses a similar leveling system to, like, I guess the closest thing I could compare it to was Elder Scrolls, where you level up each skill instead of your character, except it doesn't feel very well executed in this game. I've been meaning to get around to trying it out again at some point soon, but I don't know. I do like Final Fantasy 1 quite a lot, though. That's another game I spent a lot of time on. Not quite as much as maybe some of the other Final Fantasies I've played, but I still played it a lot. A really good way to kick off, my time playing that series. and I got this actually around the same time as 1 and 2, Final Fantasy IV Advance. And this is the first Final Fantasy that I beat. I'm actually really lazy with these games. To this day, the only ones I've actually finished are this and 7. Although I have made an effort to actually finish some of the other ones. But this one's really good. It's really simplistic. It doesn't have a lot of the same level of customization as some of the other Final Fantasy games. But, it's still pretty good. If I'm in the mood for just a really simple, just bare-bones RPG, this is usually one of my go-to games, actually. The story isn't anything spectacular. I generally don't care too much for Final Fantasy storylines, outside of maybe 6. But, the gameplay in this is pretty solid. There's a lot of bonus stuff they added in the Game Boy Advance version, and this is another old favorite of mine. Not really anything spectacular, but it's a fun game nonetheless. Castlevania Double Pack, which includes Harmony of Dissonance and Aria of Sorrow. And I found out about this coming out one day and decided to pick it up, because before this I played Dawn of Sorrow. Dawn of Sorrow on the DS when it first came out was my first Castlevania, and I always wanted to try these out, but I had trouble finding them. So when the double pack came out, I went out and picked it up, and Harmony of Dissonance I like a lot. It's up there with Zero Mission. Metroid Zero Mission as being one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games. And Aria of Sorrow is good. There's a lot of really... the level layouts don't feel quite as smart. Harmony of Dissonance has some really weird, obscure shit in it, invisible walls and stuff. But Aria of Sorrow is just really small, cramped corridors with lots of enemies filled in to just sort of knock you all over the place. It just doesn't feel as well designed as Harmony of Dissonance. Although it is fun, and the soul system can be pretty fun, but Dawn of Sorrow overall is just the more well-made game in terms of those two. But on the double pack, Harmony of Dissonance is the better game. One of my favorite Castlevanias, actually. And another Castlevania game. This is one of my loose games. Yep, up right there. Castlevania Circle of the Moon, which I played after, at some point, getting the double pack, because I was, really trying to get into the rest of the Castlevanias, and I'm not too big on this one, to be honest. Not really a fan at all. I mean, the music's very good. It definitely feels like the sort of Metroidvania-type game, but it just, I don't know. It would have benefited from having a shop like the other two GBA ones. And I mean, yeah, this was the first one on the Game Boy Advance, but it borrowed really heavily from Symphony of the Night, which had a shop, which made the game a lot easier to manage. Going through this really difficult sort of exploration-heavy game, having to grind off of enemies, basically, to get items, it got pretty tedious. I did eventually manage to beat it, but I'm not going to bother beating it again. It was too hard for its own good, and for all the wrong reasons. Final Fantasy VI Advance, another really good one, and I don't know, I love this game, but for some reason I've just never been able to get as into it as I did with 1 and 4, or even 7, which is weird, because I really like the story in this game, as opposed to all the other Final Fantasies, where I think the stories are just completely ridiculous. But this is a really good game. There's not much else to say. It's a Final Fantasy game. It has its own unique mechanics. It's a lot more customizable than 1 or 4. But I don't know, for some reason I was just never able to get as into it. I've been sort of slowly, gradually playing through it over time, and I do intend to finish it at some point soon, but we'll see how that works out. Pokmon Emerald version. This one is okay. I I personally think this is where the franchise started to slip a little bit. Like, I played Diamond version after this, which I thought was horrible. It was just so damn boring. But this one, it's alright. It's definitely, I don't think it's as good as the first two generations. But it's still a good game. It's still really fun. It just feels like it gets a little more repetitive than those. Like, it's not to say Pokemon was never repetitive. It definitely got repetitive in all of them. But this one, it just feels like towards the end of the game, just feels like such a grind. I don't know, but I still like it. Not a bad game by any means, but definitely the last good Pokemon game, in my opinion. Following up on that, Pokemon Fire Red version, which is a remake of the Red and Blue generation, the first generation. This one is great. I like this a lot. I think it definitely outshines Emeralds. They took what was already a pretty good game and sort of refined it a lot, worked out some of the kinks, modernized it, and brought in a lot of the benefits that Emerald, Ruby, and Sapphire brought in, and it all mixes together very well, unlike when they remade Gold and Silver. I was not a fan of that, but this I do like. And my very last Game Boy Advance game, which is another loose one, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. This is a really good game. It's actually really hard for a Kirby game. I was talking about how Nightmare in Dreamland was, one of the easier platformers I've played. This one is much more difficult, and it's also really exploration heavy. It's almost like Kirby Metroid in some regards. So you got these really wide open maze-like maps with loads of wrong turns and secrets, and man, I tell you, getting 100% in this game was a hell of a time. It's so much fun. This is definitely another one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, even if I haven't really played it as much as Nightmare in Dreamland. I think I definitely appreciate it more because it's one of the most unique Kirby games, I think. Really, really fun, fantastic game. And we'll just end by taking a look at this royal mess, all these games just piled up. But yeah, that was just sort of a little quick retrospective look at my Game Boy Advance collection. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave any sort of feedback in the comments. I'm always looking to improve my videos, so until next time, I hope you enjoyed my video.